The wonderful feeling of being beheld by someone who makes you feel safe and content is the most beautiful thing in the world. Artists celebrate this honest passion with vivid colors, while poets use elegant languages to capture the moment when two hearts become one. Yet, history shows that some relationships were condemned, despite being driven by genuine attraction and human desire. A few years ago, I read about the suffering endured by a young Danish woman after Germany's surrender in World War II. Many were teenagers who had barely begun adulthood when Denmark was occupied in the early 1940s. Some fall in love with young German soldiers, drawn to them by the intense emotions and physical attraction common in youth. After the war, numerous Danish women who had had romantic relationships with the German soldiers faced public humiliation. Some would parade through the streets with their heads shaved before mocking crowds. They were insulted with derogatory labels such as German maitresses or syphilis shoppers. Tragically, a number of them later took their lives, while others left their hometowns to escape the stigma attached to their past. To understand the root of this mass hysteria, it is necessary to return to the beginning of German occupation.
Denmark was protected by Nazi Germany between 1940 and 1945. So many of the orders were sent from here. There is a large communication center with telephone, radio communication.
Denmark was relatively easy to conquer in the early 1940s because long-term political and economic developments has weakened its defense. As a young democracy, Denmark reduced military spending throughout the interwar period as leading political groups prioritized social welfare over building a strong army. The Great Depression then left many young people unemployed, increasing pressure for social reforms that emphasized education and social investments instead of compulsory military service. Political makers believed that improving young people's future prospects was more important than expanding the armed forces. At the same time, Denmark's economy suffered heavily during the interwar years. Limited financial resources made it difficult to modernize the army, leaving the country strategically vulnerable when the Second World War began.
Look, there's an emergency. I have to tell the whole world. It is war in Germany and everybody have to collaborate with the Germans. Because there are jobs everywhere which we Danes could require in order to survive.
Hearing these words today can seem shocking. We often assume that all Danes opposed the German invasions and the Nazis' racist persecution of Jews and Romani people. However, in the early 1940s, the situation inside Denmark was more complex. When Germany occupied Denmark in 1940, the country was allowed to retain its government under a unique protectorate arrangement. This created economic opportunities for certain industrial and agriculture sectors. Denmark exported large quantities of food, livestock, and manufactured goods to Germany, generating significant short-term profit for companies willing to cooperate. Many Danes also traveled to Germany for work during the occupation. A small number of ideological supporters of Nazism even joined the German armed forces. Some young Danishmen believed that Operation Barbarossa, Germany's invasion of Soviet Union, was a necessary effort to stop the spread of communism in Europe. Under German pressure, the Danish government reluctantly allowed the formation of Frikorps Denmark, a volunteer unit under German command. Around 7,000 Danes enlisted over the course of the war.
Germans who lived here must have visited the small town like multiple times. I just wonder, when the locals encountered the German in the middle of the war, and here their strange accent when speaking Danish, how would they react? Hello, welcome to my country, or
Many young women, aged 18 to 25, from working-class families in small towns, often with limited contact with the wider world, became strongly attracted to German soldiers during the occupation. The soldiers' uniform was deliberately designed to project order and discipline, as well as confidence and physical strength. For many of these women, the attraction was emotional as well as physical. It had far more to do with the powerful image the uniform conveyed than any of the political sympathy for Germany. Young, polite, and well-dressed German soldiers, who often had money to spend, also brought a sense of novelty and escape from the bleak, monotonous reality of wartime rationing and blackouts.
many things were quite relaxed with the German occupation, because when German came, they actually had jobs. Some of them traveled to Germany, and with the letters, they actually could communicate with their loved ones about what kind of job they gained and also how much money they made.
Around 100,000 young men from small Danish towns, with very little real understanding of the life that awaited for them in Germany, embarked on the journey to Berlin, hoping to experience the adventure of their lives rather than to pursue any political dreams. Although they were treated far better than many other nationalities, and of course far better than the Jews, many of them endured their own share of misery in war-torn Berlin. Everywhere they went, they were confronted with wounded young German soldiers, bomb damage, and poor living conditions that worsened as the war in the Soviet Union intensified and the situation in German capital deteriorated. Those who traveled after 1942 were particularly surprised by how low the wages were in Germany. Worst of all, payment was often delayed.
One farmer's girl was courted by a handsome soldier in his German uniforms. She was probably quite enamored by how good he looks. Whenever there's an opportunity to make a call, she might say, "Hello, this is Lily calling, and I just want to say I miss you. Gastoppe, do you miss me?"
While a young and inexperienced Danish girl enjoyed her moment of romance and the attention she received from a well-paid German soldiers, who may well have been a decent gentleman, she was stigmatized by those who resented the German occupation, whether loudly or silently. I wonder how she must have felt when she saw the middle-aged woman gossiping about her love affair with the Germans as she went to the market to buy her daily groceries. In her place, I must have become paranoid, suspecting that every whisper revolved around the despised affair, and that every unfriendly glance was a further evidence that people who knew the parents might want to ostracize the family from their circle of friends. How can one calm a pounding heart and enjoy the sweetness of infatuation when insecurity is eating one from within?
Some of the girls become the informal for the German occupier power. Never ever now and then they'll keep up the phone and say, "Hello Gastoppe, I have something to report for you. I know somebody who actually want to rebel against you. Please, remember I was the one who told you that. I am patriotic."
According to a historian who has studied the National Archives, at least 271 Danish women worked for the SS in Denmark at the end of the World War II, mostly in behind-the-scene administrative roles. Their motivations range from love, adventure, and financial security to ideology, family background, and hope of a better life. Some had grown up in Nazi households and married into them. These women remained in their positions even late in the war. As the occupation grew more violently, many were influenced by pro-German news and by the hostile climate toward those seen as the outsiders. I wonder how they must have felt after Germany's capitulation. They were confronted with horrific imageries from the concentration camps.
The democratization of radio changed ordinary people's awareness as the pro-German program were running day and night from the radio. I think many people probably believe they did the right thing when working for the Germans.
Danish radio programs under the swastika underwent a dramatic transformation. A dedicated press censor reviewed every news script before it was allowed on the air. Regular newscasts were forced to omit Allied victories, downplay German defeats, and use sanitized pro-Axis language. However, Danes could still listen freely to radiocasts from Sweden and the BBC, which offered completely different perspectives on the war. This meant that German propaganda never fully controlled public opinion. Anti-German sentiment also remained close to the surface throughout the occupation, as the mood in Denmark gradually shifted towards resistance. Women who had associated with German soldiers became increasingly stigmatized.
Is it always easy to make a wise decision when there are so many different voices which shouted different messages around you? I'm not sure. I think many of the girls who fall for the charm of the Germans were probably just innocent girls who allowed their hormone to make the decision.
Many young women who had been romantically involved with German soldiers were publicly humiliated, as if these punishments were a spectacle to celebrate the end of the war. Young men who did not even know them shaved their heads and forced them into the streets, displaying them before crowds. Some even drew Hitler-style mustaches on their faces to deepen the shame. I wonder how many people in these cheering crowds paused to reflect on the cruelty of what they were witnessing. When you compare the jubilant faces of the onlookers with the frightened, humiliated expressions of the girls, it becomes clear that very few considered how such treatment might scare them for the rest of their lives. Those wounds would not fade quickly, but follow them silently into every room, every relationship, every year that come after. After the war, Danish government officials who had cooperated with the German occupation were not punished in court, unlike the trial of Quisling in Norway, nor were they subjected to public humiliation. Loyalty to the resistance quickly became the dominant social narrative in Denmark. Museums were created to celebrate Danish bravery, and films mocked the German occupiers. For decades, the fate of the so-called German girlfriends remained a social taboo, especially the harsh public humiliations they endured. Serious historic research into their experience did not begin until the early 21st century. Today, historians estimate that around 4,000 Danish girls and young women had relationships with German soldiers between 1940 and 1945.
The telephone coverage increased fast after the Second World War. Very soon, the housewives or anybody who has too much time in their hands start to use the telephone to gossip. And this device also became the most cruel apparatus toward those who had been stigmatized by society without any tribunal to actually give them a real verdict.
The silent shame of being seen as unpatriotic lingered for decades. Although the young men who had worked in Germany during the war were never publicly humiliated like the women who dated German soldiers, both groups lived with serious consequences for many years. Those who returned to their hometowns often struggled to find work, as the post-war Danish narrative focused almost exclusively on resistance, unity, and the celebration of moral courage. In this climate, anyone associated with Germany, whether through labor, romance, or ideology, risked being quietly pushed to the margins. I keep asking myself how a person could endure such constant unspoken hostility. Unlike a prison sentence, this social punishment had no fixed duration. It simply continued, reinforced by silence, memory, and the stories a nation chose to tell about itself. Those who escaped the stigma, hatred, and exclusion by moving away still carried a lifelong secrecy about their past. I wonder how they looked back on their youth in old age, knowing that the years meant to shape them had instead been marked by silence and fear.